Visual impairment is a decreased ability to see to a degree that causes problems not fixable by usual means such as glasses. Blindness is defined as the state or condition of being unable to see because of injury, disease, or congenital conditions. Depending on the severity of the condition, to qualify as a visually impaired student, certain criteria must be met. You have different types of visual impairment. You have partially sighted, which is a visual impairment that adversely affects a student's educational performance even when corrected to the extent possible. Low vision is for someone who has vision between 20/70 and 20/160 and cannot be corrected. This student would have moderate to low vision. You have legally blind, which is 2200 to 2400, and then you have totally blind, which is 2400 to 21,000. Many times, visual impairment and blindness gets worse when not corrected early. Some signs for symptoms of visual impairment are eyes don't react to bright lights being turned on in a room. So usually when you wake up and someone turns on a light when you're sleeping, it automatically bothers your eyes. When students have visual impairment, they don't react to the light. Another sign would be when eyes don't follow your face or objects. So like with babies, when you see that when you move in front of them, they usually try to follow you with their eyes. When they don't do that, these are early signs of visual impairment. And when these signs are caught at a young age, it turns out to be better if treated faster. Now for older children, the signs are a little more obvious when they are holding books up closer to their face or holding anything up to the face so they can read it. If they're rubbing their eyes a lot, you can tell that there's something bothering them. Maybe sometimes if they seem extra clumsy, maybe it's just that they're having a hard time seeing things that are in front of them. These students often tend to see better during the day than at night. And when they are having a hard time at night, then maybe there is need for an appointment so that we can catch these issues early on. A lot of people have refractive errors, which is also still considered a visual impairment. You have nearsightedness, which is also called myopia. With this, faraway images seem to look blurry, which for myself, I am nearsighted. And you also have farsightedness, which is hyperopia, which means it's hard to focus on objects that are close up. Nearly 42% of Americans ages 12 to 54 are nearsighted. This has increased from 25% in 1971. Yet, on the other hand, farsightedness is less common and it only affects just about 5 to 10% of people in the United States. This is Griffin. Griffin suffers from retinitis pigmentosa. He found out when he was younger, but did never let it affect him. He has continued to do things that he enjoyed, such as boxing, art, even though he says he's not very good at it, and still loves to run. He doesn't let his visual impairment define him or stop him from doing the things that he loves. On the next slide is a short video that'll explain more about what Griffin goes through on a day-to-day basis and how he's overcome his visual impairment.
I'd rather be outside running. It's funny, some people say, oh, I can't keep up with you, oh, I don't want to ride with you, I don't want, this, that, and the other. And it's like, I don't care what pace you want to go at. If we're at the same pace, or you're going faster than me, or slower than me, it doesn't matter. At least we're enjoying doing this outside instead of being stuck inside on a treadmill or in a gym or not doing anything at all. The only limits are the ones that you put on yourself. Being visually impaired isn't even something I think about. It's just who I am. A lot of people think you're either blind or you're not. They might not know that someone still has most of their vision, they're legally blind or they're going blind. I have retinitis pigmentosa, which is a retinal degenerative disease, which isn't rapid, it's over time, so it steadily takes your vision from peripheral down to central vision. It's mostly blurry. I can't see faces anymore. I go off of voice recognition. On my computer, phone, any device that I use, I have a black background with white letters because I might have a chance of seeing that. You know, I have a map of all of New York probably up in my head of where to go, where things are. It's either stay inside and really not do anything or figure it out. I do art, but not well. It's my art. Pottery and doing art, if you can, is very relaxing for the visually impaired and blind. For anyone really, because you're not focusing on anything else except trying to get the piece the way you want it done, or spinning the wheel fast enough or slow enough, or just coming up with ideas and letting the mind flow. I was always a standout athlete, and one day I couldn't see the ball come off the bat anymore in baseball. I decided to go back to my ophthalmologist, and she said, I think I see some pigment on the retina. Well, what does that mean? We didn't know, and then a few months later I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. How do you tell, an 11, 12-year-old that you're going blind and you're not going to be like every other kid when that's all you want? You just want to be a kid. As a family, once we did get over the fact that, okay, the elephant in the room, Griffin has a visual impairment, and got through that point and was able to talk about it openly, it just made my life easier, and it's put me on the path that I'm on now to help other visually impaired and blind people. People would think, well, that's great, that's incredible, how do you box? Well, it's not how, it's just how can we adapt it. Timing the punches, but also having a bag that is a black background with a white circle, so after a while I might be able to pick it up. It's all about repetition, muscle memory, and just stay in sync with the trainer. So we found ways around adapting a training session for a visually impaired and blind athlete. Well, we do that with everything, and that's what we try to do, is not say no, but there's a few angles and a few variables that we have to work on. Some organizations are research-based, which is incredible. They focused on help finding a cure, which is the end result. Through the organization I started, I want to help the visually impaired right now. If you'd like to get involved, please visit our website at foreseeablefuturefoundation.com.
There are many different causes of visual impairment, and getting a diagnosis early is the first step for the right interventions. Babies might have visual impairment at birth, but it can also happen to adults later on in life as a result of disease, injury, or medical condition. Some of those medical conditions are diabetes, HIV, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, but also with the fetus, it is called congenital blindness, which is vision loss that is present at birth. Most of the time, when children have vision conditions, it will stay the same throughout their life, and that sometimes may get worse. Some conditions might result in vision problems for only a short period of time, but oftentimes others might get worse over time, resulting in much poorer vision or blindness as the child gets older. When students are in school, they have to be evaluated for their visual impairment and blindness. There are two ways to evaluate students for visual impairment and blindness. Functional vision assessment is one. It evaluates how students' visual skills are with day-to-day objects such as signs, letters, colors, and shapes. It'll give you an idea of what they can see and how far away they need to be for them to see. Another assessment is the learning media assessment. It determines which of the 5 senses a student uses. This helps teachers determine a plan for learning and literacy. When students have any kind of disabilities, they tend to lean on a different sense that is more strong. For visual impairment, at times, they often rely on their ears and their listening skills. And with this assessment, it'll help you learn how to better assist the student using that sense that they are more comfortable with. That sense will help with their literacy, and you'll be able to connect with the student more with your teaching. When you become an educator, you need to figure out strategies that will help in situations when you have someone or a student that is visually impaired or even blind. Some strategies that I found were multi-sensory approaches that include spoken language and hands-on activities. This will help because many students that are blind or visually impaired may not get the visual of different aspects such as the forest. They've never seen the forest, but if they can touch leaves, it'll help them get a better visual. Providing access to visual presentations at an appropriate distance and in the child's visual field. These are for students who can still see but maybe have to see close up. So if you move their chair to set them closer to where you do your teaching and of the board, it'll help them. Have classmates and adults identify themselves or teachers identify them so students know who's talking. Determine what style and tools are best for the individual child through the learning media assessment. This will help you because you will know whether they need to have. This can mean tools such as a magnifying glass so they can see the words on a page close up, or even just sitting them closer to the board where they have a better visual of what is being taught. Reading auditory books and read alouds are great for students with visual impairment because they can listen to the words even though they may not be able to see them as clear. And having those auditory books really help with all students, especially when they're beginning learning to read. As you look at the Miller-Nines table, you can see many things that we can do as educators to adapt to students with visual impairment, such as font size of text needs to be increased, extra time on math and reading assignments because they have to use Braille systems, which they are also still learning, use of sensory activities to give students with visual impairment a better understanding of the topic, allowing students to use books that are also available in audio for different projects and reading, allow students to be read the prompt for different writing assignments, introduce students and activities in a way where you are including those who may not be able to see such students by pronouncing their names or giving a direction of where they're at, allowing students to work with their TVI at times when they're in general education classes, and getting more books that are in Braille so that students are able to follow along with the rest of the class. English language learners compared to visually impaired and blindness students are very similar, but they also have their differences. Both learners may feel discouraged when they cannot fully participate due to their disabilities. Both will have to do twice the amount of work to understand the curriculum, and both may understand some of the material depending on the level of their language learning and the level that they are visually impaired. Their differences are that with English language learners, it involves language, and for visually impaired students and blindness, they have a hard time seeing what is in front of them, so it makes it difficult for them. With both English language learners and visually impaired students, they have tools that will help them through their assignments. For instance, visual impaired students have Braille that will help them read. And then for English language learners, they have a translator that will translate from English to their native language. Technology has developed so much that it really helps students who are visually impaired and blind. We have many different tools that will help with their everyday studies, such as a reading pen, which you see a lot with younger kids when they're first learning to read. You swipe the pen across the words and it pronounces the word in audio so that students can read it. We have Braille keyboards and keypad, which many of us have seen on phones and keyboards. It helps them type and dial out for phones. We have screen magnifiers for those who are visually impaired but can still read and need it just to be a little closer, which will magnify the words in a book or on a page. That way they can see and read it better. And my favorite one that I found was a Braille smartwatch, which has a timer that tells time, a stopwatch, alarm, which was super cool because with all the development and technologies with smartwatches, smartphones, it's nice to have something that is adaptive for those who are visually impaired. Here are a few websites that will help with resources for visual impairment and blindness. AFB is the American Foundation for the Blind, which has many resources on how to help, about what they do, and how you can find others in nearby areas. All About Vision has lots of resources with articles about different things that you go through when you're having issues with your eyes, which stress that can affect your vision, where to find glasses, where to find assistive listening technology to help you out, as well as my last one, which has a talking book library, which will give you guys an opportunity to find books available in Braille and other resources to help your students learn.